Thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Patrick Wheeler. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Digital Strategies, and we are pleased today to have Kurt Schneider, founder and CEO of KMS Brand Consulting, as well as the former CEO of the Harlem Globetrotters, and held senior positions at a number of really interesting companies over his career. He's someone who understands fan engagement and customer engagement, and as you know, the center is focusing our whole year on customers and the ways that digital technologies are changing your interactions with them and the dynamics surrounding customers. So please join me in welcoming Kurt Schneider to Tuck.
Thank you.
All right. So we definitely will have a Q&A session open to the whole group. So part of the consumer and customer engagement, we will make sure we call on people for questions at any time. So, but before we do that, why don't we just go ahead? Kurt, I would love to hear a little bit about your experience and your background and share that with our students.
Sure. So yeah, Patrick and I were talking. It would be hypocritical if we're talking about my whole thesis is 3D fan engagement if I just talked at you the whole time. So this will be an interactive, engaging experience, or so I hope it will be. So I've spent my career, I went to Dartmouth undergrad. I was an English literature major, which people say, how'd you get up to where you did being an English literature major? But that's a shout out for liberal arts. It was a good background to have. I went into advertising for a bunch of years, and you guys, I'm sure, have done a lot of studying on business models and different trends in industries. And I was what was called an account guy in advertising, which the creative guys are the ones that do the copywriting and the art directing and all that. And I was doing the strategy. And as I looked forward, I saw that all the clients were having strategists in their own ranks, and they didn't need to be paying advertising agencies to have that role. And I couldn't draw, and I wasn't a copywriter. So I left and I went out and worked for Disney out in LA, and then I ran the marketing for Fox Sports Net, which is a cable network. Then I ran an internet company in Internet 1.0 back in Silicon Valley in '99 to 2002, which was an interesting experience. Then I worked for World Wrestling Entertainment. For those of you who are fans of World Wrestling Entertainment, I worked for Vince McMahon, which was quite interesting in and of itself. That's a whole nother session at a different time. And then I ran the Harlem Globetrotters for 9 years. I was CEO and was fortunate enough to be able to be on a team that turned around a dormant business and revitalized it. So that's me. And now I started my own consultancy that's trying to help other companies, a lot of private equity firms, figure out their portfolio companies and how can they really engage their customer in today's landscape. So that's sort of the premise for today's talk anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So over that time, you mentioned kind of recognizing changes and shifts and the role that digital played in those. Can you talk a little bit more about that sort of evolution that's gone over the last 25, 30 years in your career and sort of where you see things going from here?
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Not to put you on the spot to predict the future, but.
Well, it's interesting. So I think digital is hard to define anyway, right? So if you just think about brands, and that's the most important thing, and in the live event industry, which can actually be translated to all brands out there, but live events started with the Greeks. They've been around forever, and everyone has gone to live events and been excited about it. The challenge is it used to be a 2D relationship with the audience. So someone would buy a ticket, they'd go to the event was produced at them, and then they'd leave, and that was it, and that was good enough. That doesn't work anymore because right now, you're not even gonna buy a ticket if you don't know what that entertainment's all about, what that brand means to you. So right now, and the use of digital technology or digital in general, is to create consumer touch points, and that's the most important thing. So the idea is to become a 3D fan engagement. How do I get my customer, my fan, how do I turn them from being just a ticket buyer into a true fan? And how do I do that on multiple platforms and allow them to get that access to that content wherever and whenever they want to? And the rise of all these different digital platforms fell right into it, so it's perfect. You're crazy if you're not taking advantage of all of them.
Yeah. So there are some live focused groups and companies that are pretty restrictive, right? They want to hold a lot of copyright power over live streaming, for example, which is obviously kind of in a current explosion of growth with live streaming. How do you feel about?
So here's the paradox, right? The paradox in all branding, but really in live entertainment, whether it's sports, entertainment, is the more you give up control to your potential fan, the more they're going to embrace it. And there's companies out there. When I worked for Disney in the 90s, we were maniacal about not letting anyone touch Mickey or anything, nothing, because we controlled everything. Well, that's not good enough anymore. Disney's pivoted, right? They allow people, certainly on social media, literally and figuratively, to have a different filter put on their characters as you send stuff out. So those who just say, it's my walled garden or my four walls of my arena, you come in and when I got to the Globetrotters, I was telling Patrick this earlier, on every ticket it said, no video and no photos allowed. How tone deaf is that, right? If you kept it to just that, then why would I ever go again? But the ability is to get that out there and share it. And the nice thing about live events is you have the common shared experience about going. That's never going to go away. The Greeks did it, the Romans did it. You're going to want to go to a live event because you're going to want to share it with your peers, figuratively, because I'm at the common shared experience, but also digitally. When I'm in there, I want to take a video and get it out of my social network and show everyone that I was at this event, I was at this concert, I was at this sporting event, and this is how cool it is. And you allow them to then share it, and you have this social media ripple effect, which just keeps going.
Yeah. So social media obviously is such a huge force in this concept of 3D fan engagement. What are some of the potential risks associated with that from your brand perspective?
Well, first of all, it's how you use it, right? And I think the best brands using social media are doing no selling on social media. The worst brands, and you guys have all seen it because you get all these feeds, 40% off, 70% off, buy tickets. That means nothing to me. I won't even look at that. The best use of social media is allowing your fans or your audience to understand that you get them, that there's something about what you're saying they understand too. Leave the selling for later, but allow them to be engaged with the brand, let it breathe and go from there. I'll give you an example with the Harlem Globetrotters. So when I got there, the Globetrotters were a very dormant brand. They'd been around for 81 years, and the whole brand had been reduced to being just a live event touring troupe, meaning people came, if they were lucky, one time a year. So they never thought about it. There were no consumer touch points except for the live event. So you never thought about the brand. Maybe it came to your town and you bought a ticket and you went and that was it. Dormant brand, and it was chugging along on nostalgia fumes, right? So the only people that went were people like me who take my kids, because I went when I was in the 70s and I remember these guys, so I'm going to take my kids. It was a rites of passage. So the kids had a passive relationship with the brand, not an active one. They didn't go on their own. They didn't want to. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't know any of the players. So what we said is we're going to evolve the business model from being a live event touring troupe to being a global content company, an entertainment company. And we're going to push out enough content to allow our fans to access it whenever and wherever they want to. So social media was huge for that. If we just put out, which was the only marketing they did before, TD Bank North, 7:30 Tuesday, that wouldn't have done the trick. So what we did instead is we started putting content out to allow this new generation to see and access and understand and fall in love with the brand itself. So one of the first things we did was, you guys all know the game horse in basketball. You play in your driveway. So we created the world's largest digital game of horse ever. Through Facebook and YouTube, we said to our audience, send in your videos of you doing a crazy shot. We're going to vote every week, and at the end of the week, we're going to take the winning vote of what that shot is, and then the Globetrotter players have to replicate it. If they make it, Globetrotter Nation gets an H. If they miss it, the Globetrotters get an H. So all of a sudden, we got a guaranteed 5 weeks, right? Sorry, I haven't taken math in a while. 5 weeks of customer engagement. So they were putting their own videos up. They were watching all the videos that we put up to see what was going on. They voted for it themselves, right? And then they saw the Globetrotters do that same trick. So that's how we got them involved. And then now, every Tuesday, we do Trick Shot Tuesday. So people will allow our fans to put up their crazy trick shots or what we're doing, and you get it out there. There's nothing about when the ticket, where we're going, what the ticket sale is. That comes later. Allow the fans to get it. I always like to say, I want to grab onto your emotional lapels and not let go. But you've got to give your audience a chance to do that.
So everyone's going to put their trick shot up tomorrow, Tuesday, right? No. So that's a big shift for the Globetrotters, right? So culture plays a big role in. And how did you, when you came to the Globetrotters, how did you approach that change within the organization?
So when we try to evolve from being a live event touring troupe, that was all the mindset. Everyone thought they were a touring company. To the point was our fiscal year ended July 31. Our tour ended mid-April. The end of year party was at the end of April. You still had 3 more months of the fiscal year, but the mindset was, oh no, we're a touring company, that's all we work. So we had to change that around. We had a party in August. We didn't have it in July 31st. And then we created this new vision, and we boiled it down to 3 words. Everything good comes in 3s, and in business they're usually in C's. I'm sure you guys have done tons of case studies on all these different C's. We had C's too, because it was easy. Consistent consumer contact. So everyone in the company knew that's what our goal was. The end vision of our business was to create consistent consumer contact. And we needed to give our people, our employees, enough elasticity within our realm. It wasn't a linear movement anymore to be able to get to the end goal by creating consistent consumer contact wherever they could go. The funny thing was we also had to get the players didn't even have names on the back of their jerseys. So we had to put nicknames on the back of the jerseys. We created a storyline. And I remember the very first year, I brought all the players in and I said, we're going to create a story for the show. And they all knew I'd come from WWE. And they all got really scared. And they said, are we going to get hit over the head with a steel chair? And I said, no, we're not going that far. But what you need to do is create enough breadth and depth of the content before you can disseminate it so that it rings true. So we had to create characters of our players, nicknames, and we had to have enough in the storyline that there was breadth of a content that we could then disseminate out. But you had to do it sequentially. Had we just gone out there and said we're the Globetrotters without having done this first, well, it wouldn't have lasted.
Yeah. So the WWE obviously has done quite well in that realm.
Masterful.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience there and sort of in some ways a similar kind of situation?
So Vince McMahon is the P.T. Barnum reincarnate. He is the best promoter I think that's ever lived because he gets one key thing. You need to have a relationship with his characters, right? And he understands that. So all the fans of WWE, whether you like it or not, have a visceral reaction to the characters. And from the get-go, Vince used to do it on TV. They probably did it on radio beforehand, and now they do it on all social media platforms across the world. What he does is he wants you to either love a character or hate a character. For him, silence is deadly, right? He wants you cheering or booing. So for Vince, he spends all of his efforts creating those characters, and social media and digital platforms are the greatest thing for that. They'll shoot back scenes in the live event on Monday, but they'll get that out on social media and say, this is what happened between Undertaker, I've been gone so long, I don't even know if he's still around, Undertaker and John Cena on Tuesday night. And all of a sudden you realize that this is what this guy's all about and that one's all about. So you get invested in those characters. You're going to want to watch it on TV. You're then going to want to watch it live, and then you're going to want to see what happens afterwards. So it becomes a total 24/7 environment, and we tried to get it out on every platform possible.
Yeah. So the WWE was one of the early kind of companies that got that user-generated content and allowing photos and video from fans at events is advantageous. Can you talk a little bit about how that played into this concept as well?
Well, when I got to WWE, showing my age, it used to say no laser pens allowed on the ticket either, because they were afraid of people putting it in people's eyes. And we made the change there too, that you could allow them to take photos. And Vince's idea was, and it's any good marketers, if I'm allowing my biggest audience, because you paid money to go here, to take a picture of it and then share it, they're your best salesman, right? The people themselves are the best salesmen. So someone who's already bought a ticket before they even go to the live event, that's your best salesman, because they're going to want other people to come with them. So arm them, make them ambassadors, give them content that they can use. And that's what we did. We did that with the Globetrotters. You know, it's interesting. When I think about companies that don't do that, and there's a lot of companies out there that don't pivot from 2D to 3D. The biggest example I can come up with now is Ringling Brothers Circus. I don't know if you guys read, but they're going out of business. In 3 weeks, they're done. That brand's been around for 120 years. It's an icon, but they never pivoted from 2D to 3D. Now, they also lost their elephants, which was a huge appeal. But besides that, the circus mindset was, we're only going to do marketing or engagement beforehand to tell you when we're coming to town. There was no breadth and depth of this is the characters or this is what the show's going to be like. You had no opportunity to engage with it. You come to the arena, there's no interaction in the arena. Right now, people want to be involved in the arena. They wanted a customizable experience. And then you left, and that was it. They're going out of business.
Yeah. So fan engagement and building communities of fans and engaging those communities is really important. There are a lot of places to think about where to acquire some of those fans or communities, or is it better to sort of build your own community, or should you try to look to other, whether it's a platform-based approach where there are 2 billion people on Facebook? How do you have to think about where do you go to try to engage these fans at this point?
So the way I look at it is technology in general and the platforms are changing so quickly, right? They're the engine to get you there, but they're not the car itself. So the answer is yes, wherever they are, but the most important thing you can do is define what your brand is, define your hierarchy, define the messaging, define what you want to do, and then go out there wherever they are. But you want genuine fans, right? That's what I said before. The goal is, especially in live events, you don't want ticket buyers. Ticket buyers don't come back. You want a fan. You want someone who's invested in it. And so wherever they can get there, you want to get them. But buying a fan never works. Building one and allowing them to be ambassadors and build it themselves, that's what works. That's sustainable. Yeah. And that was the problem, again, with the Globetrotters, with nostalgia. That's not sustainable. You're going to go once. It's a rite of passage. I took my kids. I never need to go again. But if I'm my kids, in fact, the interesting thing about the Globetrotters, every year we did a survey. And the survey was, who was the driving force to come to see the game? And every year it was parents, parents, parents. Then we did this whole shift with digital. We did the digital horse game. We did Trick Shot Tuesday. We had 2 of our guys on Amazing Races contestants 3 times, which was fantastic for us. In fact, a little side story, the first time they were going on, I said to the 2 players, listen, it's great. First of all, I went to CBS and I said, you may not call them Herb and Nate. They are always referred to as Flight Time and Big Easy. Second of all, you must pay Warner Chappell, who had the rights to the music, to play the song Sweet Georgia Brown every time they come on. And thirdly, you must always refer to them as Globetrotters. So they agreed. So then I said to the players, listen, you're going on, and we had weekly phone calls. We were trying to explain to them some survival techniques. We brought people on. And I said, I want you to wear your uniforms in every episode. And they were quiet. It was on the phone. They said, listen, we get it. We get your branding thing. We understand that. We're going to be out there for a month. We don't know if we're going to be in the Andes in the winter or what's going on. So even I went too far on that. But we did get our operations guy to put every single piece of clothing they did have had Globetrotter branding on it. So that was huge for us. And it enabled us, as I said, to get this fan audience to understand who they are and what they're all about and have a new relationship with them rather than so the kids themselves started understanding what these guys are. And we put our guy, one of our players was on American Ninja Warrior. And we had shows on Scooby-Doo, not Scooby-Doo, that was a long time ago, Disney's Kicking It, all these Disney cable shows. So we had kids shows, every time we would put videos out every week. Now, we wouldn't put the full-length video out because we don't want to ruin the show itself, but we'd show a trick shot or we'd teach kids how to spin the ball on their finger. There was some way to get it out there. Anyway, the last 3 years I was there, the #1 driver to go on the live event was kids. So we were able to turn the boat. And that took a long time, but it worked because they now have their own relationship. They have an active relationship with the brand.
So to be successful when you're trying to figure out customer engagement, consumer engagement, fan engagement, you have to think a little bit about collecting data.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the role that data plays in these initiatives?
Yes. So first of all, in anything, certainly in my business, right, I gave you my background where I worked. None of those industries, businesses are curing cancer, right? No one's having a heart attack if we screw up. So the first thing I tell everyone is try something different. And with the Globetrotters, we only stayed one night in a town. So if we were in Manchester, New Hampshire last night, the next night we're in Portland, Maine, they don't know what we did the night before. So you have a lab every single night to try something different. And the easiest way you collect data on a live event, are they clapping, are they booing, or are they quiet? right? And so you can see what you're working and what you're not. So that's one we do. We would do surveys in arena. You do surveys online afterwards, but you need to allow your fans to have an impact. And what I always told my guys is, and I think this is important for any business, when you're collecting feedback from someone, take one of the ideas that fits with your overall business model, because you don't want to change unless it's a brilliant thing and it makes you change your whole business model. Take one of the ideas that your fans, your audience, your consumers give you and put it in place, and make a public deal of putting it in place. Because then you can say no to 90 other things that they give you suggestions, but the fact that you said once makes your customer realize they actually listen to me. They get me. They understand who I am. So again, with the Globetrotters, we had a different storyline every year. And I had a producer in our organization who would write the show, and then we'd present it to the players. We always took the first idea the players gave us, and we put it in, and then they bought into it. And once they buy into it, just like your employees buying into it, right? They're not toiling in obscurity. They understand why they're doing it. They feel a part of it. Then it's ownable. And you want your customer to own the experience and feel good about it, because if they own it, they're going to be a lifelong fan.
So that leads me to one other question around international expansion, right? Because fan bases globally can be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the growth internationally, how you kind of approach thinking about whether it's the Globetrotters, the WWE, Disney's obviously faced this challenge as well. How do you have to think differently? Can you use the same principles and adapt, or what is it?
So it's interesting, if you think about certainly the businesses I've been in wrestling, you don't need any translation or any rules, right? Someone wins and someone loses. You can tell who the bad guy is and the good guy is. It doesn't matter what language it's in. In basketball, you can get that. So the idea for us internationally is, again, how do you bring them into the brand itself with a subtle difference? So I'll give you a really interesting example about consistency. When I worked at Disney, we had the movie Pocahontas. Oh, you guys weren't even born probably then, but there was a movie Pocahontas out. And Disney was so interested in the way the brand Pocahontas was communicated across the world that what they did is they had, it was the language, I think it was in 23 different languages, the film to begin with. And they went out and they found a woman in each of these 23 different languages that sounded the same of Pocahontas. So whether they were singing it in Portuguese or Mandarin or in French or whatever it was, if you were a kid, you heard that voice, that was Pocahontas, even though it was 23 different women singing this song, but it was brand consistency throughout. So for us in WWE, one of the key parts of international was just, it sounds simple at the time, but at one point we had 3 disparate businesses. We had TV, which was just get Raw and SmackDown on wherever you can. We had live events that went over here, and then we had consumer products, and they weren't integrated. So the simple thing was, wherever you're having your TV show, then bring your live events, and then you can sell consumer products. Hey, it worked pretty easily. And this wonderful thing called the internet doesn't know geographic boundaries. So in fact, with the Globetrotters, we had more Facebook fans overseas in the very beginning than we did domestically. Don't know why, and so we catered to that and said, here's the brand. The only difference is for us as a branding thing, we didn't market different, but for the Globetrotters, Eastern Europe wanted more competitive basketball, whereas in Asia, they wanted more of a show. So you had to change a little bit and customize it as you went.
Yeah.
But it's a global, it truly is global, and there are not many differences.
So our students are at the point where they're now getting ready to leave and join a wide range of different companies. Do you have any thoughts for them or advice for them for as they leave Tuck and they go out into the big, bad digital world? I know, but you can roll eye rolls I'm getting, but
yeah.
What advice would you give them from a fan and customer engagement perspective?
I think, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but get the brand right and know right away that technology is going to change no matter what. There's nothing you can do about it. So don't be so slavish to the technology. Be slavish to your customer and get it out to wherever your customer is. And you need to adapt to the customer. But it's interesting. I think as an employer, that's how we've changed the way we look at things too, because it used to be Look, I started working before email. We had this crazy thing on the third floor of our advertising building that was called the fax center, where you went in and you shoved a piece of paper into this black hole and somehow it came out as a fax. I mean, that's how old I am, but it was a long time ago. But you have to change all the time. So it used to be in business, you had a very linear perspective of the way you manage your employees. Here's our business plan, here's what we want to get to, A to B to C, all the way to Z. Nowadays, it's not linear. And so as an employee and as an employer, you have to be open to the fact and elastic enough to that fact that it's not going to go A to Z. So as long as we get to Z at the end, we can go A to R to B to M to G, but you're going to end up at Z. That takes security and confidence from the employer, and it takes the ability for the employee to say, you know what, I'm not just going to go A to Z because that's not right, but I still have the end goal in mind. I know, and constantly communicating to the people you're working for that you get the end goal, and they'll be okay. Create confidence in them that you know where you're eventually getting to, and you might not get there, but you know where you want to go.
Great. All right, so I think at this point we can open up to the audience for questions. Ricardo.
I'm curious about understanding your perspective about music concerts, because compared to WWE or the Harlem Globetrotters, you don't have an interaction there that the fans are watching. You have a lot of interaction between the public. So how do you feel about people that are just filming and some artists that complain about it? What would be your take on that?
You know, the music industry is tough, right? And right now, they used to tour to sell more albums, right? Now they put out an album so they can sell more live events. So it's changed that dynamic completely. And I think they've gone through such an upheaval with way back to Napster and everything about how much control they have over their brand and what they don't. That's tough, but the music industry started when it was on radio by sampling, if you think about it, right? I heard it on the radio, and then I want to go buy the album. So the nice thing about the record industry, music industry, is you don't just listen to a song once. So if I were they, I would allow people to film it, I'd allow people to get excited about it, and then they're going to want to buy more of it and turn their friends on to it. So I think they need to be completely open. Share the song, film the whole thing going on, send it to my friend, and then they're going to want to get into behind that band, either go to the live event next time or buy the song itself or whatever, listen to it on Spotify. But that is a different relationship, right, of the performer to the audience. It's not as interactive. It's tough.
Did you ever worry about a point where you would just kind of run out of content, where it got to you were sharing everything you could, you had all the intricacies displayed, and you were kind of fearful of letting go and like releasing every single component of the show, and people not coming to the show at that point? Like, that's the question.
So I'll answer that three different ways. In the live event business, the answer is no, because people still will go to a live event. So I'll give you an example. Every year we would do a special on ESPN with the Globetrotters. And I would film one of the games we do in the very beginning of the year, and that was what we put on ESPN. And everyone said to me, what are you doing? You're giving away, and some of the shows had, because we could choreograph them, I don't know if you guys have seen the Globetrotters, but it's choreographed. And there was always a big finish at the end, and it was always an overtime, and we always won. I'm sorry if I gave it away. And so everyone would say to me, are you worried about giving it away? You're showing it on free TV. The dynamic in live events is they'll still want to come. They still want to see it for themselves. So there is that common shared existence. So that's number one. Number two is, yes, you do worry that eventually you've given everything away, what do you have? But the ability of empowering your fans to then create content back from you creates a never-ending stream of content, right? So that's the best thing about user-generated content. So the Trick Shot Tuesday, what started as our guys doing a trick shot, is now the fans doing it. So they're providing the content for us. So that's giving it up, but getting it back. And they put it underneath the filter of, it's a Globetrotter trick shot. So you don't worry about that. And the third thing is, you also deputize not only your fans, but your employees to share and come up with ideas. So again, for the Globetrotters, we would say to our players, and there was 28 players, you all have iPhones. You're all at practice every day doing something. Film yourself. Get it out there. But you have to have the trust to do it right. You know, in the very beginning of the internet, when some of the Globetrotter players were overseas and putting a Facebook post of them with a Globetrotter jersey on or a t-shirt on in a nightclub with a drink and we're wholesome family entertainment is not a good idea. But once you establish sort of the mindset and the ground rules, they'll create the content for you. So it's like a snowball. You get it going and it keeps, the nice thing is it doesn't end. You don't run out of ideas. Except I left the Globetrotters last year after 9 years. Maybe they're running out now, but my 9 years we did.
I'm curious how you manage your own talent of producers and directors and maybe choreographers to extent. So if you're constantly having to adapt to new technology, new trends, new finds, whatever is coming out, how do you then hire or retrain people to adapt to that?
Yeah, it's a great point. So for both WWE and the Globetrotters, at the end of the day, the main show itself didn't change based on technology, right? So the Globetrotters, we were still playing a basketball game. We still won every game, but it's the components within it. And one of the interesting things for us is we would try to be topical. So our producer would find songs to go into the show that then people would interact with the fans and get excited about. The problem with songs are, a month later, they're not in. So when we write the show in September, we had this with, what was that, Gangnam Style song? Do you guys remember that? It was huge, right? So we put it in the show in September. By March, when we were still doing it, and it was long gone, it was, oh boy, we got to change. So again, for me, that's your A to Z with your elasticity. As long as our producer and the choreographers and the people knew where we wanted to get to at the end, then give them the freedom to change that out throughout the time. Whereas beforehand, it would have been, wait a second, we have well, look at United Airlines, right? I mean, they had a process and they got to change that. And the reason why that happened is they went A to Z down the line. That's not good.
What was the thought process when you were evaluating business partners, whether they were content partners or sponsors, advertisers? Did you purposefully integrate them into digital extensions of the brand?
The idea is we always wanted to. And the idea is also that it was going to expand. So if you had the right partner, you're using their network and getting it out there. But you are the partner, what's that expression? The partner, the company you keep, right? So you have to pick your right partner. And I'm sure this fits you guys, but we were private equity owned as the Globetrotters. And when you're private equity owned, the private equity guys are great, but they care one thing, and it's called EBITDA. And I'm sure you guys are learning all about that, and you've known about it beforehand, and that's all they care about. So when you have an opportunity to get a partner who's a paying partner, which helps EBITDA, but might not be the best long-term, you have to decide if you're going to do that or not. But the idea is completely integrated throughout the whole thing. We would integrate them into the show itself. So we would create, the nice thing again about choreographing the Globetrotters and it not being a NBA game, is you can put a partner right into the show and create opportunities in the show because you're writing it. And if you do it that way, the audience is actually okay with it. They accept it. You're not trying to pull one over on them. They get it. A lot of times our tongue was firmly in our cheek and they appreciated that. But the idea is the best partnerships that always work are integrated. So even back to non-digitally, when I was at Disney, I worked with American Express, which was our big partner. And American Express wanted to be, they paid Disney a lot of money in the theme parks. That's where all the money was spent. And they did not want us to use Visa. Well, you can't, right? You can't be Disney and say you can only use an American Express card because then 80% of your audience can't come in. So they wanted something special. So we created something called white glove treatment. And what we did is we went around the park and we said to all the different areas in the park, give us something that's soft cost to you, but a huge benefit. So for instance, again, Pocahontas again, we did a Pocahontas show live every day. It was free because you already paid a ticket, but we would do reserved seating for white glove treatment. We called it white glove treatment American Express card members. You got a fanny pack, which seems really cheesy. By the way, they're coming back, I hear. But you got a fanny pack, and that was really cool because when you're walking around the parks, you needed something to put something in. So it was, again, a lot of, at a character breakfast, which you already paid for, we guarantee that a character would stop by your table. Low cost, integrating partners, you feel really good about it. So long story short is, if you're just looking at your partners as a Machiavellian approach, as either a cash cow or to get you to a certain end, it's going to be very short term. They won't come back and you'll blow it.
And that gets to something we were talking about earlier today as well with some of the sports leagues who are facing who signed long-term partnership agreements, and then technology changes. So, the NFL obviously just released their deal with Amazon Prime for Thursday night streaming, and I can't imagine DirecTV continues to like a lot of these changes with their long-term deal.
So we talk about 2D to 3D is the guys that don't work are again so important to keep it within their four walls. Well, those television networks that were paying billions of dollars wanted to keep that content completely exclusive. But it's just like American Express and Disney at the theme parks. You can't do that because everyone's cutting a cord. They don't have this stuff. So for the league to have the chutzpah to say we're going to go, well, they also got money for it, but to go over the top now and to stand up to DirecTV and ESPN is really important and really interesting, because what that means at the end of the day, the consumer's winning, right? Because consumer consumes stuff on different platforms and now they're getting it, where they used to only be able to get it if you paid for a DirecTV package.
Does it mean, though, that for the NFL they have to find different revenue sources long term, as those deals probably aren't renewed, or maybe they are?
They will make enough money from Amazon and from Hulu and everyone else and whoever else the new platform is. So as long as the content is compelling enough, people will pay for it.
I have a question about, so you touched a little bit on data, but over what time frame do you expect these changes actually make a difference? So when your higher ups start asking you, we implemented these changes, I expect to see these results. Like a 5-week time frame for playing horse, that seems like a long time in this, I expect things like this.
So the first part of that, it depends on the organization you're in. Organizations with large bureaucracy, it'll take a long time because you won't be able to do anything with it. Organizations that are much more entrepreneurial, you can put something into place right away. So I think one, it depends on the organization you're in. Number two is it's what the data is impacting you, changing. If it's a wholesale change, that's going to take a really long time. But if something that's quick, you can put it in very quickly. And for us, again, with the Globetrotters, we would collect data one night and change it the very next night. So you could do it, and the more you can do it rapidly, the better it is, because otherwise it becomes stale, right? Especially these days. The data you get in September might be completely different if you wait till April to implement it. So you have to try it first. And I had a guy that worked for me once, used to have a great expression, and he used to say, 80% correct, 100% on time. And that's interesting, right? Because especially in this day and age, you'd much rather be 80% correct and 100% on time than the other way around. So I think a lot of people wait and they wait and they wait, and then it's too late. So the other thing that Patrick and I were talking about earlier, which I think impacts business, and especially any business with digital landscape, is I had a mentor of mine once, a guy by the name of Dick Parsons, who was the chairman of Time Warner. And I went to take over the Globetrotters, and I went to Dick's office in Time Warner, this huge place, and I said, what am I going to do? I'm taking over the Globetrotters. Here are all the problems. He said, listen, you're going to get a lot of advice, but here's the best advice I'll give you. And he said, it came from a mentor to me, and I'm passing it on. What you have to do is like a game of kick the can. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, every day you're going to have 20 things that you've got to do. You can kick one can 4 feet, the next can 4 feet, the third 4 feet. At the end of the day, you kicked all 20 cans. They only went 4 feet. My advice to you, kick one all the way across the room, then come back and kick the other one. Now that haunted me my entire time, right? Because you don't know which one to do. Am I kicking the right can or am I not? But what that does for an organization, if you kick one can all the way across, it's just like when you're working out or skiing or anything else, you create organizational muscle memory, right? Everyone learns to say, this is how my role is in that process. This is how I can get something from A to Z. This is how it works as we go all the way there. And success begets success. So if you're all focused on one thing, amazing how successful that can become. You get all the way to the end of the room, you come back, you kick your next can, and you go from there. As I said, that haunted me because which one are you kicking? But that's a really important thing for organizations to use, especially organizations that are entrepreneurial where roles are not that well defined. When roles are not defined, you get a lot of silos, you get a lot of people doing their different stuff when they want to. You have subjectivity rather than objectivity, but if you say this is the one thing we're doing, let's get everyone behind this, you're going to create that organizational muscle memory, and you're going to be able to do it and come back and do another one. I don't know if that answered the question, but I wanted to tell you guys about kick the can anyway, because that's pretty cool.
So, like when you have a digital customer engagement, you obviously face the risk of backlash, and that backlash can become really bad very quickly. Have you ever faced any crisis of your brand at any point in that long career? And because we've talked about the successes already, but we didn't talk much about, or did not have any.
Lots of it. By the way, this has nothing to do with that, but the first mistake I ever made, I'd been in business for 6 months, and I was working in advertising on Hellmann's mayonnaise. You guys know what Hellmann's mayonnaise is? West of the Rockies, that's called Best Foods mayonnaise. It's the same product, which I learned pretty quickly. Talk about inefficient use of product and marketing. So we had to shoot every commercial twice. Hellmann's, all right, same back thing for Best Foods. So my job as a junior assistant account executive was to do research. What do people think about the commercials? Well, I sent the Hellmann's tape to Oregon and the Best Foods tape to DC, and people didn't even know that product existed. So that was a big issue there. What do? You take your lumps and go from there. But anyway, with WWE, we had a lot of issues. And we had a lot of people that were trying to replicate moves they saw in the ring, and they would get seriously injured or die. And that was huge. So what do? You address it head on right away. First of all, you say, we don't condone this in any way. This is not what we're all about. But anyone, and United Airlines is the great example, anyone who tries to say no to damage or try to not address it head on and hide from it is going to have a lot of problems. Customers appreciate authenticity. At the end of the day, if you're authentic, they'll be okay that you screwed up, because guess what? Everyone screws up. But if you don't admit to it and you try to slide it under the rope, under the rug, eventually they're going to say this is not an authentic brand. Be genuine, and customers will forgive you. We had a couple problems with that with the Globetrotters too, with players that are out there all the time, and you're only as good as your player you can't control. So what do? Sometimes you fire the player. You let everyone people know the player was fired and because they did something untoward, or otherwise you have the player come out and either apologize or say something. So, but again, it's addressing it right away, and it's being genuine and being authentic, because at the end of the day, authenticity wins. And people's bullshit meters are really, really sensitive these days, right? Because you guys as consumers have such access to everything. You know when someone's bullshitting you. And so it's stupid to try to turn a blind eye to it, which again, anyway.
Yeah, I'm curious, with your shift to kids, what kind of challenges did you face in terms of like reaching them on social media and then being able to collect data on them in terms of that stuff?
That's a great question, right? So that's tough. So we did it 2 ways. One is we figured we were going to push content out to the kids, and you can't collect the data from them. 2 is for ticket sales, we were going to their moms, because mom controlled the purse strings and entertainment decision inside the house. So we did a dual-pronged approach, a duopoly, if you will, of Target, right? And thankfully, mom did have some nostalgia. But mom's the ones we could collect all the data on. Kids, we said, we're just going to go out there and put content out, and the more they interact, that's what we're going to get out of them. So the fact that we did have kids sending in videos, that we did have kids doing this, we couldn't collect the data on them, right, because of all the laws, which is correct, but we saw that they were interacting. And what's also interesting, so the Globetrotters sell a lot of merchandise in Arena. And if you're a parent, when you guys get to be parents, you'll know this, and you take someone to a live event, you have to buy your kids something, right? It's just, you have to buy them. If the brand means nothing, right, you'll get away with doing the cheapest thing possible. So when I first got there, the Globetrotters sold a ton of wristbands for $5, right? You got something, red, white, and blue, and if the kid didn't know anything, fine. The last 3 years I was there, jersey sales tripled. And we sold more units of jerseys at $65 each than we did of a tour t-shirt at $25 each. Why? Because the brand meant something and the players meant something. So TNT was our first female Globetrotter in 18 years. We sold a ton of her jerseys, the little girls, because they wanted to be like TNT. And they were driving mom and dad crazy on the nag factor about that. So that is data you can collect that is not, there's different ways to collect the data without having the specific. And then we also got it through surveys, so we'd ask mom, what does your kids feel that way too?
So working with sports in the entertainment industry, like I just wonder how's your life outside your work? Do you watch a lot of shows yourself? Try to understand the customers? And another question is, what's your suggestion for people who want to do entertainment and sports after MBA?
So the first part is yes. I love sports, I love entertainment, I love everything about it. I do find it hard. I always try to come to something as a consumer and a fan first, but I find it hard to not think, boy, this is what they're doing wrong about it all the time, which is kind of annoys my family sometimes. But I'm a huge fan of all entertainment and all sports. In fact, I was telling someone the other day that I don't watch a lot of television. They said, oh, are you one of those snobs? I said, no, I love television. I just don't have time. I mean, television's fantastic these days, but technology's great because now with Netflix, you can watch it whenever and wherever you want to. Hey, it fits the thesis, right? Yeah. You can pull it down whenever you want to. So the nice thing about sports and entertainment is evergreen, right? You're always going to have sports. You're always going to have entertainment. It's not fad-driven. What you have, what one of the components might be fad-driven, but the business is not. We actually grew during the recession, the Globetrotters, which is interesting. We grew more than we ever had. Reason being, I used to say we kind of offered a chicken soup for the soul a little bit, that we had a low price point, and it was something that you knew we were going to win, so it was a guaranteed good time, and it was a guaranteed good time for the whole family. But long story short, the business is growing, and it's merging more and more together. We haven't talked about esports at all, right? Do you guys know about esports? The numbers are staggering. Esports is kids watching other people play video games live, and they're paying for it. There are professionals out there. So the League of Legends game is huge. This business alone by 2020 is going to be a $2 billion, that's with a B, dollar business. Colleges are recruiting esports athletes and giving them scholarships. It is here to stay. The numbers of people watching it, as I said, are staggering. More millennials watch esports than they do Major League Baseball or the NHL. So that business is here to stay. No one knows how to make money on it yet, right? It's like the beginning of digital advertising. No banner ads, you can't make money on that. People are still trying to figure that out. But that is here to stay, and that is the fusion. So if you want to get into sports entertainment, I'd say yes, and they're constantly reinventing themselves and creating themselves. The thing about esports is that can be 3D fan engagement because the kids are playing the game at home. They're seeing all these characters. Then they go to Madison Square Garden. And by the way, Madison Square Garden sold out in, I think it was 18 minutes, 2 shows for esports. People go in and then they watch these kids playing the games. And the NBA and 2K just announced they're going to do next year the NBA E-League. They're going to have the E-Knicks play against the E-Lakers. But it's not going to be Carmelo Anthony playing against LeBron. They're going to be actual esports professionals who have nicknames like, Plumber Joe and Freddie May or whatever, and those are going to be the new IP that they're going to be building around. And the NBA is going to be creating stars out of Freddie the Plumber and whatever, and these guys will make a lot of money. So people always want to be entertained. People are always going to want to go to it, right? I started with the fact that the Greeks did this stuff. Sports and entertainment are merging more together, especially on these platforms, but it's a great fun business. And at the end of the day, I did an interview a couple years ago with Sports Business Journal, which is one of those trade things. I said, what do you like about your jobs? I said, at the end of the day, we're selling sports, right? For the Globetrotters, at the end of the day, our job was to put smiles on faces. Who wouldn't want to do that?
As far as the future of digital engagement, you see specifically in sports and the NBA, the big push for virtual reality, and even in the NBA playoffs, they're talking about the 360 cameras and things like that. How do you see that playing out? Is that something you're really excited about? Do you think that's just more of a fad?
I think it's going to be great. I think more and more and more, the more content you can give a person who's excited about it, then the more you've got them and latch them to become a lifelong fan, right? So you can look things, a lot of times I'm sure in your case studies you've talked about same-store sales in retail, right? So in entertainment, you look at revenue per fan. So obviously you want to bring more fans in. That's the best way to do it. But for the ones that are coming in, you want them to come more often and you want them to spend more when they're there. Giving them opportunities from a VR perspective, from 360, whatever, just gets them more excited to be a lifelong fan, and they'll pay you more money because they'll do more and more things about it. So I'm excited for it. Could be a fad, but 3D televisions were a fad. That didn't last. But
when you were entering the Harlem Globetrotters organization and you were thinking about pivoting, you talked a little bit about creating buy-in by taking the first suggestion that the players offered, but how did you go about building your institutional credibility within the organization to take it in a new direction?
So it's a great question. The first part of that is the easier answer, which is we were private equity owned and we knew we had to get our act together, so you were either on the ship or you weren't, right? But the second part of it is we had people at the organization with tons of institutional knowledge about the brand itself, how to put on a show, how to operate and get people from here to there. But we didn't have a lot of people who knew about branding and marketing for the Globetrotters. So I did a lot of turnover, and the only marketing the Globetrotters had done was Tuesday, 7:30, Staples Arena. That was it. And that was the end of the funnel. You need to do marketing at the beginning of the funnel to get them excited about it. So we turned over our whole marketing department from ticket sales and brought in a CMO, we made a whole brand marketing aspect of it. We brought in a sponsorship sales person to do sponsorship sales, a licensing person to license out. So we brought in new functions, but more than that, what I did was every week, and my office was in Phoenix and I live in Connecticut, so I never let anyone bitch to me about the length of their commute, by the way. So I was in Phoenix 2 or 3 times a month, and every time there I'd have a town hall meeting where everyone would come in and we'd have people on the phone, and I'd explain exactly what we were doing and why we're doing it, the good and the bad. Here's what's happening, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're not, and here's what's coming up next, so that everyone knew, and that's the best way to get buy-in. No one wants to toil in obscurity. No one wants to just say, I don't know why I'm working here. They want to know the greater good. And by the way, if they know the greater good, they're going to do a better job at it. It's more job fulfillment. And I didn't have all the answers. And every time also, I'd ask people for questions and suggestions. And just like with the players, when I got suggestions from employees, I'd put one of them into play. So they felt like they were being heard. You have to. The other cool thing, so as I said, I went to Dartmouth and I played rugby my last couple of years here, and our coach had this thing every year called Welsh Rugby. Now in rugby, I don't know if you guys know the game, but there's 15 guys on a side, and there's 2 basic elements. You have the pack and you have the backs. Now the pack are the guys that are in there, the big guys, and they're rucking. You've seen a scrum, you've seen those pictures, right? Well, the guys that play back say, those Neanderthals, they don't do anything. They're in there, they're scraping like this. We get the ball, we score, we do all the work. Now if you're a member of the pack, you say, those backs don't do anything. They just wait, we do all the work, and they go in there. And there's this constant friction between the back and the packs. In every business, there's constant friction during different things. There's sales and finance. There's marketing, right, and ops. So my coach in rugby, I don't know why he called it Welsh Rugby. And once a year, we'd have a practice, but it was a live scrimmage. And if you were a pack, you played in the backs. And if you were back, you played in the packs, and you played a whole game. What did you get? Perspective. Wow, that's really hard to do. I get that. So I always thought that was really cool. So every business I've been in, and certainly as I was able to get more senior, I was able to do this, I would always make Welsh Rugby. And I would bring in, and I'd say to my guys, I did it at the Globetrotters once a year, here's one project, and it was a real project that we'd have to work on, whatever it is that so it was real time, it wasn't made up. My finance guy had to be the marketing guy. The sales guy had to be the ops guy. And I made everyone have a different role, and they would have to come into the room and present their case from their new role of something we're working on. That just helps. The biggest thing at all in business is trust, right, and respect. If you don't trust and respect the person you're working with, you're going to be more siloed. So that just helped break it down.
Great. Well, I think we're just about out of time. Please join me in thanking Kurt for joining us today.
Thank you, y'all. This has been great. Thanks for your questions.